Adrian Stark's blood turned to ice as he read the message that had just appeared on Mia Cross's computer screen. Found you, little bird. Time to come home. You have 48 hours before I start killing everyone you care about, starting with your billionaire boyfriend. The words glowed against the black background like a death sentence, and Adrian's hands trembled as he realized Mia, his brilliant, gentle secretary who brought him coffee every morning with a smile that could melt steel, had been living under a threat he'd never even suspected. The penthouse office was supposed to be empty at 2 a.m., but Adrian had returned to retrieve files for tomorrow's board meeting, only to find Mia's workstation still logged in. He'd intended to simply close her programs and lock her computer, a small act of protection for the woman who'd somehow become the center of his carefully controlled world. Instead, he'd stumbled into a nightmare. Hey beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel where love meets danger, and secrets can either destroy us or set us free. I'm getting chills just thinking about what you're about to experience with me. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. I love connecting with you all around the world. And if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do it now because this story is going to take you on an emotional roller coaster you'll never forget. Adrian's mind raced as he scrolled through the message thread, each new revelation hitting him like a physical blow. The messages had been coming for weeks, dozens of them, each one more threatening than the last. Screenshots of Mia entering his building, photos of her apartment, images of her morning coffee shop, her usual subway stop, even the small bookstore where she spent her lunch hours. Someone had been watching her, hunting her, and she'd been facing it alone. Mr. Stark. Adrian spun around to find Mia standing in the doorway, her dark hair disheveled and her usually pristine appearance suggesting she'd been running. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of her typical professional attire, and her green eyes were wide with a fear that made Adrian's chest tighten with protective fury. Mia. Adrian's voice came out rougher than he intended. Your computer was still on and I thought. You saw them. It wasn't a question. Mia's shoulders sagged with the exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying an impossible weight for far too long. The messages. Who the hell is threatening you? Adrian demanded, moving toward her with the controlled intensity that had made him a legend in corporate boardrooms. And why didn't you tell me someone was stalking you? Mia's laugh was brittle, broken. Tell you what, exactly? That your secretary has a past that could get you killed? That the woman you've been... She stopped abruptly, her cheeks flushing with color that made Adrian's heart race despite the crisis surrounding them. The woman I've been what? Adrian asked quietly, stepping closer until he could smell the subtle lavender scent of her shampoo, until he could see the gold flecks in her green eyes that had been haunting his dreams for months. Nothing, Mia whispered, but her eyes said everything her voice couldn't. Mr. Stark, you need to stay away from me. Whatever you think you feel, whatever's been happening between us, it has to stop. Before he hurts you too. Adrian reached out to touch her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with a gentleness that contradicted the steel in his voice. Like hell. Mia closed her eyes as if his touch was both salvation and torture. You don't understand. Victor isn't just some stalker or obsessive ex-boyfriend. The lights went out. Emergency power kicked in a second later, bathing the office in red emergency lighting that made everything look like a scene from a horror movie. Adrian's security system began blaring warnings, and his phone buzzed with alerts from the building's automated defense protocols. He's here, Mia whispered, her face pale as death in the crimson glow. Oh God, Victor's here. Adrian grabbed Mia's hand and pulled her toward his private elevator, his mind shifting into the tactical mode that had kept him alive through corporate wars and assassination attempts by business rivals. Who is Victor? And how did he get past building security? Victor Kozlov, Mia said as they reached the elevator, her fingers flying over the control panel with a speed and familiarity that made Adrian's blood freeze. Former Russian intelligence officer turned private military contractor. And he got past your security because I taught him everything he knows. The elevator doors opened to reveal a man in black tactical gear, pointing a military-grade assault rifle directly at Adrian's chest. He was massive, easily 6'4" with the kind of muscle that came from a lifetime of violence, and his pale blue eyes held the cold intelligence of a predator who'd never failed to catch his prey. Hello, little bird, Victor said in accented English, his voice carrying the casual warmth of a lover greeting his beloved. Did you miss me? Adrian stepped protectively in front of Mia, but Victor's laugh was like broken glass. Mr. Stark, Victor continued conversationally, I must thank you for taking such good care of my Mia. She looks healthy, well-fed, happy even. It will make breaking her spirit so much more satisfying. She's not your anything, Adrian snarled, his hands clenching into fists despite the weapon trained on his heart. Oh, but she is, Victor replied with deadly certainty. Mia belonged to me long before she became your secretary. Long before she learned to pretend she was just another American girl with a boring office job and simple dreams. Adrian felt Mia trembling behind him, but when she spoke, her voice carried a strength that made his heart swell with admiration and terror in equal measure. I stopped belonging to you the night I put 3 bullets in your chest and left you for dead in that warehouse in Prague, Mia said quietly. Apparently, I should have used more bullets. Victor's smile was pure evil. Yes, little bird. You should have. The assault rifle swung toward Mia with lethal intent, and Adrian realized that the gentle, brilliant woman he'd fallen in love with was about to die because of secrets she'd been carrying alone. Unless he could find a way to save them both from a past that had finally caught up to destroy everything they'd built together. But as Victor's finger tightened on the trigger, one question echoed through Adrian's mind like a death knell. Who was Mia Cross before she became his secretary? And what had she done to earn the attention of a Russian killer who'd apparently come back from the dead to claim her? The answer, Adrian suspected, was about to get them both killed. The world moved in slow motion as Victor's finger squeezed the trigger, but Adrian's body was already in motion, muscle memory from years of executive protection training taking over. He tackled Mia to the ground as the elevator wall exploded where her head had been milliseconds before, his body shielding hers as fragments of marble and metal rained down around them. The stairs, Mia gasped, her breath warm against Adrian's ear as they pressed against the elevator floor. Emergency exit behind your office, he won't know about it. Adrian looked into Mia's eyes and saw something that made his heart stop. Not fear, but calculation. Cold, professional assessment of tactical options that no secretary should possess. Whoever Mia Cross had been before she started bringing him coffee and organizing his schedule, she'd been trained for exactly this kind of situation. Can you get us out of here? Adrian asked quietly. I can try, Mia replied, and Adrian caught the flash of something deadly in her green eyes before she moved with liquid grace toward his office, staying low and silent as Victor's boots echoed through the reception area. Adrian had built his empire on reading people, on understanding their motivations and predicting their actions. But watching Mia navigate his office with the precision of someone intimately familiar with combat situations, he realized he'd been blind to the woman he'd been falling in love with for 6 months. Adrian, Mia whispered as they reached the hidden panel behind his bookshelf, a security feature only he and his head of security knew about. Before we go any further, you need to understand something. The woman you hired as your secretary, the woman you've been having feelings for, she doesn't really exist. What do you mean? Adrian asked, though part of him already knew the answer would shatter everything he thought he understood about his life. My name isn't Mia Cross, she said as the hidden door slid open to reveal a stairwell that led to the parking garage. I'm not from Ohio, I didn't go to business school at Columbia, and I've never worked for any of the companies on my resume. Adrian felt his world tilting off its axis. Then who are you? My real name is Elena Volkov, Mia said quietly, the admission seeming to physically pain her. I was born in Moscow, trained by the SVR from age 14, and spent 8 years as a deep-cover operative for Russian intelligence. The words hit Adrian like physical blows. You're a Russian spy. I was a Russian spy, Elena corrected. Until I discovered that my handler, Viktor Kozlov, was selling intelligence to the highest bidder and using his operatives as personal assassins for private clients. When I tried to expose him, he framed me for the murder of an American diplomat I was supposed to be protecting. They moved quickly down the stairwell, Elena's movements silent and precise, while Adrian's mind raced through the implications of her confession. So you shot him? I shot him because he was about to execute me for treason, Elena replied. But Victor didn't die, obviously. He disappeared into the private military world where men like him thrive, and I. She paused, her voice catching slightly. I ran. For 3 years I've been running. Adrian felt pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. The false identity. The perfect resume. You weren't just looking for a job when you applied to be my secretary. I was looking for protection, Elena admitted as they reached the garage level. Stark Industries has government contracts, federal security clearances, connections to intelligence agencies. I thought if I could disappear into your corporate structure, maybe Victor would never find me. But he found you anyway. Elena's smile was bitter. Men like Victor never give up. And I made a crucial mistake. What mistake? Elena stopped walking and turned to face Adrian, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I fell in love with my cover identity. I fell in love with being Mia Cross, with having a normal life, with bringing you coffee every morning and pretending I belonged in your world. Adrian stared at this woman who'd just revealed that everything about her was a lie, and felt his heart breaking not with betrayal, but with understanding. You fell in love with me. I fell in love with you, Elena confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. Which is the most dangerous thing I could have done, because now Victor knows exactly how to hurt me. The sound of footsteps echoing in the stairwell above them shattered the moment. Victor had found their escape route. My car, Adrian said, pointing toward his Aston Martin. Bulletproof glass, armored chassis, encrypted communications. If we can reach it. He'll have backup, Elena interrupted, pulling a pistol from somewhere in her jacket that Adrian hadn't even noticed. Victor never works alone anymore. There will be men positioned throughout the garage, probably snipers on the surrounding buildings. Adrian watched Elena check her weapon with practiced efficiency and realized he was seeing the real woman for the first time. Not the gentle secretary who'd been slowly healing his cynical heart, but the lethal operative who'd survived 3 years running from one of the world's most dangerous men. Elena, Adrian said quietly, whatever happens next, I want you to know that the woman I fell in love with, Mia or Elena or whoever you are, she's real. The way you laugh at my terrible jokes, the way you remember how I like my coffee, the way you've been healing something in me I thought was permanently broken, that's real. Elena's eyes filled with tears that she couldn't allow herself to shed. Adrian, you don't understand. Everyone I've ever cared about, Victor has killed. My parents, my mentor who tried to help me escape, even a baker in Prague who was kind to me when I was hiding there. Loving me is a death sentence. Then it's a good thing I'm harder to kill than a baker in Prague, Adrian replied with grim determination. And Elena, I'm not running from this. Whatever it takes to keep you safe, whatever it costs, I'm not letting Victor take you. Elena stared at him with an expression of amazement and terror. Why? Why would you risk everything for someone who's done nothing but lie to you? Adrian reached out to cup her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears she could no longer hold back. Because in 6 months of working together, of sharing quiet moments and stolen glances, of falling asleep thinking about your smile and waking up excited to see you again, in all of that, the only thing that was a lie was your name. Everything else, everything that matters, was real. The stairwell door above them exploded open, and Victor's voice echoed through the garage like thunder. Elena, my love, there's nowhere left to run. Mr. Stark's building is surrounded, his security team is dead, and his precious corporate empire is about to become collateral damage in our reunion. Adrian felt rage building in his chest as Victor's words sank in. He killed my security team? Victor doesn't believe in witnesses, Elena said grimly, her weapon trained on the stairwell entrance. Or survivors. Elena! Victor's voice carried false warmth that made Adrian's skin crawl. I have a proposal for you, little bird. Surrender yourself willingly, and I'll give Mr. Stark a quick death instead of the slow, painful end I had planned. Counteroffer, Adrian called back, his voice carrying the authority that had built an empire. You walk away now, and I don't destroy your entire organization with the resources of a man who's worth $8 billion. Victor's laughter echoed through the garage. Mr. Stark, you Americans always think money can solve everything. But some things are more valuable than wealth. Some things are worth any price. Like what? Adrian demanded. Revenge, Victor replied with deadly sincerity. And love. Elena belongs to me, Mr. Stark. She always has, she always will, and I will burn down this entire city to prove it. Elena's face had gone pale as she listened to Victor's declaration. He's not going to let you live, Adrian. Even if I surrender, even if I go with him willingly, he'll never forgive you for touching what he considers his. Then we make sure he doesn't get the chance to try, Adrian said with grim determination. But as tactical lights began sweeping the garage, and the sound of boots suggested Victor had brought significant backup, Adrian realized they were trapped in a concrete box with no way out and facing a man who'd apparently killed an entire security team just to reach the woman Adrian loved. The question wasn't whether they could escape. The question was whether either of them would survive long enough to fight for the love they'd found in the midst of Elena's carefully constructed lies. There, Elena whispered, pointing toward a maintenance tunnel barely visible behind Adrian's parking space. Emergency drainage system. It connects to the subway tunnels 6 blocks away. Adrian looked at the narrow opening and realized Elena was proposing they crawl through New York's underground infrastructure while being hunted by trained killers. Are you serious? I'm serious about keeping you alive, Elena replied, her green eyes fierce with determination. Victor's men will have the elevator, the stairwells, and all street-level exits covered. Underground is our only chance. The sound of tactical teams deploying throughout the garage made the decision for them. Adrian followed Elena toward the maintenance tunnel, marveling at how she'd spotted an escape route he'd never noticed despite parking in the same space for 2 years. How did you know about the drainage system? Adrian asked as they reached the tunnel entrance. I've been planning escape routes from this building since my second day on the job, Elena admitted, prying open the tunnel access with tools she'd apparently been carrying all along. Occupational paranoia. Occupational paranoia that's about to save our lives, Adrian pointed out, following Elena into the narrow concrete passage that smelled of damp earth and urban decay. They crawled through the tunnel in silence, Elena leading with the confidence of someone who'd memorized every detail of their route. Adrian found himself studying the woman ahead of him. The way she moved with lethal grace, the professional efficiency of her actions, the deadly calm that had replaced the gentle demeanor he'd known as Mia Cross. Elena, Adrian said quietly as they navigated a junction between tunnels. In the garage, when Victor said you belonged to him, what did he mean? Elena paused in her forward movement, her shoulders tensing with old pain. Victor recruited me when I was 14. My parents had been killed in a bombing, and I was living on the streets of Moscow, stealing food to survive. He offered me training, purpose, a family within the intelligence service. He saved you. I thought he saved me, Elena corrected. But Victor doesn't save people, Adrian. He collects them, shapes them, owns them. For 8 years, I was his perfect weapon, beautiful enough to seduce targets, deadly enough to eliminate them, loyal enough to never question orders. Adrian felt sick imagining Elena as a teenager, vulnerable and alone, being molded into an instrument of violence by a man who saw her as property rather than a human being. What changed? Adrian asked. I was assigned to eliminate a tech executive in Berlin who was allegedly selling sensitive information to Chinese intelligence, Elena said as they continued crawling through the tunnel system. Standard elimination mission. Seduce the target, gather intelligence, terminate the threat. But when I got close to him, I realized the intelligence was false. He wasn't a traitor. He was a whistleblower who discovered that Victor was selling American military secrets to multiple foreign governments. Victor had me kill an innocent man to protect his own criminal enterprise. Adrian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold tunnel air. And that's when you turned against him. That's when I realized I was never an agent serving my country, Elena said bitterly. I was an assassin serving Victor's greed. Every mission, every target, every life I'd taken, it had all been about profit, not patriotism. They emerged from the tunnel system into a subway maintenance area, the fluorescent lights harsh after the darkness they'd been crawling through. Elena immediately moved to a wall-mounted computer terminal, her fingers flying over the keyboard with practiced skill. What are you doing? Adrian asked. Checking Victor's operational profile, Elena replied, accessing databases that Adrian was certain required extremely high security clearances. If he's brought a full tactical team to New York, there'll be electronic signatures, radio traffic, equipment manifests, insertion logistics. Adrian watched Elena work, noting the casual way she navigated systems that probably contained enough classified information to start international incidents. Elena, what exactly was your security clearance level when you were active? High enough, Elena replied distractedly, then cursed in what sounded like Russian. This is worse than I thought. Victor's not just here for me. He's planning something bigger. What do you mean? Elena turned the computer screen toward Adrian, showing what appeared to be building schematics, security protocols, and personnel files. These are the plans for the Federal Reserve Bank, the stock exchange, and 3 major financial institutions. Victor's not just hunting me. He's planning to use my capture as cover for the largest financial terrorism attack in American history. Adrian stared at the screen in horror as the scope of Victor's operation became clear. He's going to hold you hostage while his team robs the financial district. Worse, Elena said grimly. He's going to broadcast my execution live to demonstrate that American security is worthless while his team crashes the entire financial system. Victor's not just trying to reclaim his property, he's trying to destroy the American economy. Adrian felt rage and determination building in his chest as he realized Victor's plan would cost thousands of lives and destroy millions more. We have to stop him. Adrian, you don't understand the resources Victor has access to, Elena said desperately. Private military contractors, former intelligence operatives, criminal organizations across 4 continents. He's not just one man. He's the head of an international network that specializes in exactly this kind of operation. Then it's a good thing I'm not just one man either, Adrian replied with the steel that had built an empire. Elena, my company has government contracts worth $3 billion. I have relationships with federal agencies, military contractors, and intelligence organizations that Victor can't even imagine. Elena stared at him with growing hope and terror. You're talking about going to war with one of the world's most dangerous men. I'm talking about protecting the woman I love and preventing a terrorist attack that could destroy everything I've spent my life building, Adrian corrected. The question is, are you with me? Elena looked at Adrian. This brilliant, powerful man who'd somehow fallen in love with her despite every lie she'd told, every secret she'd kept, every reason he had to run from the danger she'd brought into his life. Adrian, Elena said quietly, if we do this, if we fight Victor instead of running, there's no going back. He'll never stop hunting us. We'll never have a normal life, never have the quiet happiness I've been dreaming about. Then we make sure Victor doesn't survive to hunt anyone, Adrian replied with deadly calm. Elena, I've spent my entire adult life building walls to protect myself from people who wanted to use me, hurt me, or take what I'd earned. But you, even when you were lying about who you were, you never wanted anything from me except the chance to belong somewhere. Adrian. I love you, Adrian said simply. Not Mia Cross the secretary, not Elena Volkov the spy, but the woman who laughs at my terrible jokes and remembers how I like my coffee and somehow made me believe that love was worth the risk of being hurt again. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she realized Adrian was offering her something she'd never thought possible. Not just love, but partnership. Not just protection, but the chance to stand and fight instead of running and hiding. I love you too, Elena whispered. God help me, I love you too. Adrian pulled Elena into his arms, kissing her with the desperate passion of 2 people who'd found each other in the midst of chaos and refused to let go. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard and Elena's eyes were bright with tears and determination. So what's the plan? Elena asked. Adrian smiled with the confidence that had made him legendary in the business world. We're going to do what I do best. We're going to outthink, outmaneuver, and outlast our competition. But first, we're going to call in some favors. As Adrian pulled out his encrypted satellite phone and began making calls to people Elena had only heard about in intelligence briefings, she realized that falling in love with Adrian Stark might have been the most dangerous thing she'd ever done. It was also the first time in her life that she had a partner instead of a handler, someone fighting beside her instead of someone controlling her from a distance. Viktor Kozlov thought he was hunting a lone operative who'd betrayed him. Instead, he was about to face the combined resources of a billionaire's empire and the lethal skills of a woman who'd finally found something worth fighting for. The war for Elena's freedom was about to begin. And this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. 2 hours later, Elena found herself in the most surreal situation of her life. Sitting in a war room buried 3 levels beneath Adrian's Manhattan headquarters, surrounded by federal agents, military contractors, and intelligence operatives who were treating her like an asset rather than a fugitive. Agent Volkov, said Director Sarah Connor of the FBI's Counterintelligence Division, a steel-haired woman who'd apparently flown in from Washington within 90 minutes of Adrian's phone call. We need everything you know about Viktor Kozlov's operation: personnel, resources, objectives, and timeline. Elena glanced at Adrian, who was coordinating with his security team and what appeared to be a small army of federal resources. She'd known Adrian was wealthy and well-connected, but watching him orchestrate a counterterrorism operation with the efficiency of a seasoned intelligence officer was revealing layers of her boss, her lover, that she'd never suspected. How many people does Victor typically deploy for major operations? Director Connor asked, pulling Elena's attention back to the briefing. Depends on the objective, Elena replied, her mind shifting into operational mode. For personal retrieval, hunting me, he'd use maybe 6 specialists. But if he's really planning financial terrorism, he'd need at least 40 operators across multiple strike teams. Jesus, muttered Agent Jack Reacher, Adrian's head of security, a former Navy SEAL who'd been coordinating building defenses. 40 trained killers loose in Manhattan. 40 trained killers with access to military-grade equipment and intelligence that matches anything our government agencies possess, Elena corrected grimly. Victor doesn't hire amateurs. Adrian looked up from his conversation with someone who Elena suspected might be the director of national intelligence based on the deference everyone was showing the video call. Elena, Adrian said, his voice carrying the authority that had made him legendary in boardrooms and apparently in federal crisis management. I need to know, what's Victor's psychological profile? What drives him beyond the terrorism and the money? Elena felt her chest tighten as she considered the question that cut to the heart of her nightmare. Victor doesn't see people as individuals. He sees them as assets to be collected, weapons to be used, or obstacles to be eliminated. But with me, she paused, gathering courage. With me, it's personal. Personal how? Director Connor asked. Elena met Adrian's eyes across the room, drawing strength from his steady gaze. Victor trained me from adolescence. Shaped my skills, my loyalty, my entire identity. In his mind, I'm not just a former operative who betrayed him. I'm his greatest creation who rejected his vision of what I should be. So this is about control, Adrian said with understanding that made Elena's heart ache. This is about ownership, Elena corrected. Victor would rather kill me than let me belong to anyone else, especially someone like you, wealthy, powerful American. Everything Victor hates about the world that rejected him. Agent Reacher was studying surveillance feeds from across the city, his expression growing increasingly grim. We've got movement. Multiple teams positioning around financial targets throughout lower Manhattan. This is really happening. Director Connor stood abruptly, her phone buzzing with what Elena suspected were updates from federal surveillance assets. Agent Volkov, we need your assessment. If Victor's primary objective is capturing you, would he abort the financial attack if we offered a trade? Absolutely not, Elena said without hesitation. Victor never settles for partial victory. He'll use the terrorist attack to maximize psychological impact when he broadcasts my execution. In his mind, the financial chaos and my death are both necessary to prove his superiority. Adrian's expression darkened with protective fury. Like hell. Mr. Stark, Director Connor said carefully, we appreciate your resources and cooperation, but Agent Volkov is now under federal protection. The decisions about how to proceed. Director Connor, Adrian interrupted with steel in his voice. With all due respect, my company's quantum encryption algorithms are protecting half the financial infrastructure Victor's planning to attack. My security team knows this building better than anyone, and my personal resources are funding this entire operation. I'm not stepping aside. Elena watched this exchange with growing amazement and terror. Adrian was positioning himself as co-leader of a federal counterterrorism operation, and somehow it was working. The agents and officers in the room were deferring to his authority as much as Director Connor's. Besides, Adrian continued, his eyes finding Elena's across the room, Victor made this personal when he threatened the woman I love. He's not just attacking the financial district, he's attacking my family. Elena felt her heart skip at Adrian's public declaration, but Director Connor's expression suggested she was less impressed with romantic declarations than operational realities. Mr. Stark, emotional investment can compromise judgment in tactical situations, Director Connor warned. Director, emotional investment is the only thing that's kept Elena alive for 3 years, Adrian replied. Her love for innocent people made her turn against Victor. Her desire to protect others made her risk everything to expose his crimes. And my love for her is going to help us stop him permanently. Elena realized Adrian was right. Love hadn't made her weak. It had made her willing to fight for something bigger than survival. Love had transformed her from a weapon into a protector. There's something else, Elena said suddenly, a memory surfacing that made her blood run cold. Victor's not just planning a financial attack and my execution. He's planning a demonstration. What kind of demonstration? Director Connor asked. Elena's hands trembled as she accessed her own memory files, recalling conversations from years ago that had seemed like hypothetical scenarios at the time. Victor believes American intelligence agencies have become complacent, that our security is an illusion. He's planning to prove it by broadcasting live footage of his operation. Every breach, every death, every moment of chaos. He's going to live stream a terrorist attack, Agent Reacher said with disbelief. He's going to live stream my capture and execution while his teams destroy American financial infrastructure, Elena corrected. Victor wants the world to watch American power crumble in real time. Adrian's phone buzzed with what appeared to be an urgent message. His face went pale as he read whatever had arrived. What is it? Elena asked, moving to his side with the protective instincts that had been growing stronger every moment they'd been together. Adrian showed her the message, and Elena's heart stopped as she read Victor's words. Mr. Stark, I have men positioned to eliminate every person in your building who matters to you. Your employees, your security team, even the lovely barista who makes Elena's morning coffee. Surrender my property within 1 hour, or I begin killing them one by one until you comply. Elena stared at the message in horror as she realized Victor had expanded his target list to include everyone she'd come to care about during her time as Mia Cross. The custodian who'd wished her good morning every day. The IT specialist who'd helped her with computer problems. The mailroom clerk who'd shared stories about his grandchildren. He's going to kill innocent people because of me, Elena whispered. He's going to kill innocent people because he's a monster, Adrian corrected firmly. Elena, this isn't your fault. Victor made his choices long before you came into my life. But they're in danger because I brought him into their world, Elena argued, her guilt threatening to overwhelm her. Director Connor was coordinating with federal assets, but Elena could see the grim reality in her expression. There were too many potential targets, too many ways for Victor to strike, too many innocent lives at risk. We need to end this, Elena said suddenly, her voice carrying a determination that made everyone in the room look at her. Victor wants me? Fine. But we do this on our terms. Elena, no, Adrian said immediately. We're not using you as bait. We're not using me as bait, Elena agreed. We're using me as the weapon Victor trained me to be. But this time, I'm choosing my own target. Elena turned to Director Connor with the confidence of someone who'd spent years planning impossible missions. I need tactical support, communications equipment, and a clear extraction plan. But most importantly, I need Victor to believe he's winning right up until the moment he realizes he's lost. Director Connor studied Elena with the assessment of someone who'd spent decades evaluating intelligence operatives. What are you proposing, Agent Volkov? Elena looked at Adrian, this incredible man who'd risked everything to protect her and was about to watch her walk back into the nightmare she'd been running from for 3 years. I'm proposing we give Victor exactly what he wants, Elena said with deadly calm. His perfect weapon, his ultimate prize, his final triumph. Right up until the moment I put a bullet in his head and end this forever. Adrian stared at Elena with an expression of love and terror that made her heart ache. Elena! Adrian, I love you, Elena said simply. I love you enough to stop running. I love you enough to stand and fight. And I love you enough to make sure Victor never threatens another person you care about. As federal agents began planning what might be the most dangerous operation any of them had ever undertaken, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years of running and hiding. Hope. Not hope for survival, she'd given up on that long ago. Hope that love really could triumph over fear, that trust could overcome betrayal, and that sometimes the best way to protect the people you cared about was to face the monsters who threatened them. Victor Kozlov thought he was hunting a frightened refugee who'd stolen his property. Instead, he was about to face a woman who'd finally found something worth dying for, and a man with the resources to make sure she lived to enjoy it. The hunt was about to become a war. And Elena Volkov was ready to remind Victor exactly what kind of weapon he'd created when he'd trained a terrified teenager to fight for the people she loved. Elena stood on the roof of Stark Industries as dawn broke over Manhattan, the FBI's tactical equipment making her look more like the lethal operative she'd once been than the gentle secretary Adrian had fallen in love with. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was standing atop the building where she'd found safety, preparing to surrender that safety to protect the man who'd given it to her. Audio check. Director Connor's voice came through Elena's nearly invisible earpiece. All units in position. Phoenix in position, Elena replied, using the code name that felt strange after 3 years of being Mia Cross. Ready for final approach. Elena, Adrian's voice cut through the tactical chatter, his tone carrying every emotion he was trying to suppress. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. Elena touched the small transmitter hidden in her collar, knowing Adrian was watching her through multiple camera feeds from the command center 60 floors below. Adrian, if Victor's demonstration succeeds, if he broadcasts himself destroying American financial infrastructure while executing me, it won't just devastate the economy. It'll inspire copycat attacks for years to come. I know the stakes, Adrian replied quietly. But Elena, if we lose you... You won't lose me, Elena interrupted with more confidence than she felt. Because you taught me something Victor never understood. What's that? The difference between being a weapon and being a warrior, Elena said softly. Victor made me a weapon, deadly, obedient, disposable. But you showed me how to be a warrior, someone who fights for the people she loves instead of just following orders. Elena's phone buzzed with Victor's final message. Rooftop of Stark Industries. Come alone, or I begin executing hostages immediately. You have 5 minutes. He's here, Elena announced to the tactical team. All units maintain distance until you hear my signal. What's the signal? Agent Reacher asked. Elena smiled with cold determination that would have made Victor proud if he'd known it was about to be turned against him. You'll know. The rooftop access door opened, and Victor emerged with the casual confidence of someone who'd never failed to achieve his objectives. He looked older than Elena remembered, but no less dangerous. Still the predator who'd shaped her from a terrified teenager into a perfect killer. Hello, little bird, Victor said warmly, as if they were meeting for coffee instead of a confrontation that would determine whether thousands of innocent people lived or died. You look well. America has been good to you. America gave me something you never did, Elena replied, walking toward Victor with the grace he'd trained into her from adolescence. Choice. Victor's smile was indulgent, paternal, completely at odds with the weapons he carried and the destruction he'd planned. Choice is an illusion, Elena. I taught you that. People are shaped by their circumstances, their training, their nature. You can pretend to be an American secretary, but you'll always be my perfect weapon. You're wrong, Elena said simply. Am I? Victor pulled out a tablet, showing Elena live feeds from locations throughout the building. Look at your friends, little bird. The security guard who always smiled at you. The accountant who shared pictures of her grandchildren. The maintenance worker who asked about your weekend plans. Elena's heart clenched as she saw a dozen people she'd come to care about, all in the custody of Victor's operatives, all completely unaware that their lives hung in the balance of a conversation happening 60 floors above them. They're innocent, Elena said. Innocence is another illusion, Victor replied. These people work for a man whose technology has been used in weapons systems that killed children in Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan. Their innocence is built on willful ignorance. That's not their fault. Fault is irrelevant, Victor said with the casual cruelty that Elena remembered from her training. Power is the only truth that matters. And today, I demonstrate to the world that American power is an illusion that can be shattered by one man with proper planning and superior will. Elena moved closer to Victor, close enough to smell the cologne he'd worn during her training sessions, close enough to see the scars where she'd shot him 3 years ago, close enough to attack if she could create the right opportunity. Victor, Elena said quietly, what you're planning, the financial attack, the live stream, the executions, it won't bring you peace. It won't heal whatever wound made you into this. Victor's expression flickered with something that might have been pain before hardening into resolve. Peace is for people who've never seen what I've seen, little bird. The world is a battleground where only the strong survive, and sentiment is the weakness that destroys even the most powerful warriors. Is that why you're so angry? Elena asked with genuine curiosity. Because I chose sentiment over strength? Because I chose love over loyalty to you? Victor's hand moved toward his weapon, his control slipping for the first time since Elena had known him. You chose weakness over strength. You chose a life of delusion over truth. You chose a man who could never understand what you really are. Adrian understands exactly what I am, Elena replied with absolute conviction. He understands that I'm someone who was broken and rebuilt herself. Someone who was used as a weapon but chose to become a protector. Someone who was trained to feel nothing but learned to love everything. Love made you weak, Victor snarled. Love made me stronger than you ever imagined possible, Elena countered. Strong enough to stand here instead of running. Strong enough to risk everything to protect innocent people. Strong enough to face the monster who created me and refuse to be controlled by him anymore. Victor drew his weapon with lethal speed, but Elena was already moving, 3 years of anticipating this moment, allowing her to react with inhuman precision. But instead of attacking Victor, she did something he'd never taught her, something that went against every instinct he'd programmed into her. She stepped backward, toward the edge of the roof, trusting that the man who loved her would be ready to catch her when she fell. "You're right about one thing, Victor," Elena said as she reached the roof's edge, wind whipping her hair around her face. "You did create the perfect weapon. But you forgot the most important rule of creating weapons." "What rule?" Victor demanded, his weapon trained on Elena's heart. Elena smiled with the peace of someone who'd finally found her purpose. "Never create something that's stronger than you are." Elena threw herself backward off the 60-story building, Victor's roar of rage following her into the empty air as she activated the device that would signal federal agents to begin their assault. But instead of falling to her death, Elena felt strong arms catching her as Adrian's specialized rescue team executed the extraction plan they'd rehearsed for hours. Military-grade cables and equipment designed for corporate espionage missions suddenly served as the ultimate expression of trust between two people who'd learned to love despite every reason to fear. "Got you." Adrian's voice came through her earpiece as she was pulled safely into the building's emergency extraction point on the 50th floor. "Always," Elena replied, her heart racing not with fear, but with exhilaration as federal tactical teams stormed the roof above them and began the systematic dismantling of Victor's entire operation. As the love story that had begun with deception transformed into a partnership built on absolute trust, Elena realized that Victor had been wrong about everything that mattered. Love hadn't made her weak. Love had made her brave enough to jump off a building and trust that someone would catch her. Love had made her strong enough to face her demons and refuse to be defined by them. And love had made her powerful enough to choose her own ending instead of accepting the one someone else had written for her. The war wasn't over yet. But for the first time in her life, Elena Volkov knew she was fighting for something that made victory not just possible, but inevitable. The federal assault on Victor's operation lasted exactly 17 minutes. But for Elena, watching from the command center as tactical teams moved through Stark Industries, every second felt like an eternity of waiting for the other shoe to drop. Viktor Kozlov had never been defeated in 20 years of operations, and men like him didn't go quietly. "Rooftop secured." Agent Reacher's voice crackled through the communications array. "Target escaped via helicopter." "Repeat, Victor is in the wind." Elena felt her blood turn to ice as she realized their carefully planned operation had failed at the crucial moment. "How did he escape?" "We had eyes on all air traffic." "Stealth helicopter, military grade," Director Connor reported grimly. "He was off our radar before we even knew he was moving." Adrian was coordinating with building security, his face pale with the realization that Victor's escape meant their victory was actually a Pyrrhic defeat. "Status on the hostages?" "Secure. All building personnel accounted for and unharmed," Agent Reacher confirmed. "But we found something else." Victor left a message. On the main screen, Victor's face appeared in a video recording that had clearly been prepared in advance. His pale eyes held the cold satisfaction of someone whose primary plan had always been expendable. "Elena, my dear little bird," Victor said with paternal warmth that made Elena's skin crawl. "If you're watching this, it means you've chosen sentiment over practicality once again. How disappointing, but not unexpected." Elena stepped closer to the screen, noting details about Victor's location that might provide clues to where he'd gone. But Victor's next words made strategic considerations irrelevant. "By now, you've discovered that I've escaped your elaborate trap. What you haven't discovered is that the financial attack was never the primary operation. It was misdirection designed to make you focus on the wrong target." Adrian's face went ashen. "What does he mean?" Victor's image smiled with predatory satisfaction. "While your federal friends were so cleverly surrounding my decoy teams in Manhattan, my real operatives were implementing the true objective, acquiring the one person whose life Elena values more than her own." The screen changed to show surveillance footage of a small farmhouse in what looked like rural Virginia. Elena's heart stopped as she recognized the location, and the elderly woman tending to a garden outside the modest home. "Sarah Cross," Elena whispered, her worst nightmare materializing on the screen in front of her. "Your foster mother," Victor continued in voiceover. "The woman who gave you a home when you first escaped to America. The woman who taught you to bake cookies and helped you create the Mia Cross identity. The woman who believes her adopted daughter is a simple secretary working for a nice businessman in New York." Elena sank into a chair as the full scope of Victor's real plan became clear. While they'd been preparing to counter his financial terrorism, Victor had been targeting the one person Elena cared about more than her own survival. Sarah doesn't know about your past, does she, little bird? Victor's voice carried cruel amusement. She has no idea that the daughter she loves so much is actually a trained killer who's been living a lie for 3 years. How do you suppose she'll react when she learns the truth? The footage changed to show Victor's men surrounding the farmhouse, their military-grade equipment and tactical positions, making it clear that Sarah Cross was now a prisoner in her own home. You have 24 hours to surrender yourself, Elena, Victor continued with deadly calm. Come alone to the coordinates I'm sending to your phone, or Mrs. Cross will learn exactly what kind of monster she's been harboring. I'll make sure her last moments are filled with the knowledge that her beloved daughter's love was just another lie. The video ended, leaving Elena staring at a black screen that reflected her own face. A face that Sarah Cross had kissed goodnight for months, when Elena was learning to be human instead of just a weapon. Elena, Adrian said gently, moving to her side. Who is Sarah Cross? The only person who ever loved me without wanting to use me, Elena replied, tears streaming down her face. When I first escaped from Victor, I was broken, paranoid, didn't trust anyone. Sarah found me living in an abandoned building, sick and starving, and she didn't ask questions. She just took care of me. Elena pulled out her phone to show Adrian photos she'd never shared with anyone. Images of herself and an elderly woman with kind eyes baking in a farmhouse kitchen, working in a garden, sitting on a porch swing watching sunsets. Sarah taught me how to be Mia Cross, Elena continued. Not just the identity, the person. She taught me how to smile genuinely, how to make small talk, how to care about people without calculating their usefulness. She taught me how to love. Elena, Director Connor interrupted carefully, we can mount a rescue operation. Tactical teams, aerial support, full federal resources. Victor will kill her the moment he sees federal agents, Elena said flatly. Sarah's not a trained operative who can survive a firefight. She's a retired librarian whose greatest risk in life used to be overwatering her tomatoes. Adrian was studying the surveillance footage with the analytical mind that had built his empire. The farmhouse is isolated, defensible terrain, clear sight lines for miles in every direction. Victor chose the location perfectly. He's had 3 years to plan this, Elena said bitterly. While I was learning to be happy, Victor was mapping every person I'd ever cared about, finding the perfect leverage to force my surrender. Agent Reacher's voice came through the communications array with updates that made their situation even more desperate. Satellite surveillance shows at least 12 hostiles around the target location. Military-grade equipment, sniper positions, and what appears to be enough explosives to level the entire property. Elena stood abruptly, her decision crystallizing with the clarity that had made her Victor's most effective operative. I'm going. Absolutely not, Adrian said immediately. Adrian, Sarah is going to die because of choices I made, Elena replied with quiet determination. I won't let Victor hurt an innocent woman to prove a point about my disobedience. Elena, if you surrender to Victor, he'll torture you, probably kill you, and broadcast the entire thing as propaganda, Director Connor pointed out. Your sacrifice won't save Mrs. Cross, it'll just give Victor everything he wants. Then I make sure Victor doesn't get what he wants, Elena said with the cold calculation Victor had trained into her. I go to him, yes. But I go as the weapon he created, not the victim he expects. Adrian grabbed Elena's hands, his eyes desperate with the fear of losing her. Elena, no. We can find another way. My resources, federal support, whatever it takes. Adrian, look at me, Elena said gently, cupping his face in her hands. Sarah Cross saved my life by teaching me how to be human. You saved my soul by teaching me how to love. But now I need to save her life by remembering how to be the thing Victor made me. You're talking about walking into a trap designed specifically for you, Adrian said desperately. I'm talking about turning Victor's trap against him, Elena corrected. He expects me to surrender out of sentiment, to choose Sarah's life over my own survival. He doesn't expect me to choose both. Elena turned to Director Connor with the authority of someone who'd spent years planning impossible missions. I need tactical support, but from a distance. When I give the signal, I need immediate extraction for both Sarah and myself. What signal? Director Connor asked. Elena smiled with the deadly confidence that had made her Victor's perfect weapon before love had transformed her into something more dangerous. A weapon with a conscience and people worth fighting for. You'll know, Elena said, echoing her words from the rooftop. Because Victor's about to learn the difference between owning someone and underestimating them. As Elena prepared for what might be her final mission, Adrian realized that the woman he'd fallen in love with was about to walk into the hands of the man who'd spent years shaping her into an instrument of death. But watching Elena plan her approach with lethal precision tempered by absolute love for an innocent woman who'd shown her kindness, Adrian understood something that Victor never would. Elena wasn't going to her death. She was going to war. And the woman Victor had created to be his perfect weapon was about to show him exactly what perfection looked like when it was wielded by someone who fought for love instead of fear. The only question was whether Adrian would ever see her alive again, or whether Elena's love for Sarah Cross would cost him the only woman who'd ever made him believe in happy endings. Elena stood in the Virginia countryside at sunset, the coordinates Victor had provided leading to a meadow half a mile from Sarah Cross's farmhouse. She wore the simple black dress Victor had always preferred for his operatives, elegant, practical, with hidden places for the weapons she hoped she wouldn't need to use. Her earpiece crackled with Adrian's voice, transmitted from the mobile command center they'd established 5 miles away. "Elena, you don't have to do this alone. We can abort, find another approach." "Adrian," Elena said softly, knowing this might be their last conversation. "If something goes wrong, if Victor wins..." "Nothing's going wrong," Adrian interrupted fiercely. "You're coming home to me, Elena. Both you and Sarah." Elena smiled despite the terror churning in her stomach. "I love you, Adrian Stark. I love you enough to believe in happy endings for the first time in my life." "I love you too," Adrian replied. "Now go save your foster mother and come back to me so we can plan that normal life you've been dreaming about." A black SUV emerged from the tree line, moving toward Elena with the steady precision of a military convoy. Victor's operation was smaller than she'd expected. Just one vehicle, minimal visible security. Either Victor was supremely confident, or he was planning something she hadn't anticipated. The SUV stopped 20 feet away, and Victor emerged alone, looking more like a successful businessman than an international terrorist. He wore an expensive suit and carried himself with the casual authority Elena remembered from her training days. "Hello, little bird," Victor said warmly, as if greeting a beloved daughter returning home from college. "You look beautiful. Defiant but beautiful." "Where is Sarah?" Elena asked without preamble. "Safe for the moment," Victor replied, gesturing toward the farmhouse in the distance. "She's having tea in her kitchen, completely unaware that her life hangs in the balance of our conversation. She asked me to tell you that she's proud of how well you're doing in New York." Elena felt her heart clench with guilt and love for the woman who'd never stopped believing in Mia Cross's fictional life. "Victor, Sarah doesn't know about my past. She's innocent in all of this." "Innocence is a luxury, Elena," Victor said with paternal disappointment. "Mrs. Cross chose to harbor a fugitive, even if she didn't know it. Actions have consequences regardless of intent." Elena studied Victor's positioning, noting that he'd chosen ground that gave his hidden operatives clear sight lines while limiting her options for escape. But there was something different about Victor's demeanor, a satisfaction that went beyond simply recapturing his wayward asset. "You're not here to take me back," Elena realized suddenly. "This isn't about reclaiming your property or punishing my disobedience." Victor's smile was proud, almost fatherly. "My brilliant little bird. You always were too intelligent for simple solutions." "Then what is this about?" Victor began walking in a slow circle around Elena, his movements casual but predatory. "This is about completion, Elena. About transforming my greatest success into my most perfect demonstration." Elena felt ice forming in her veins as she began to understand Victor's real plan. "Demonstration of what?" "The power of proper conditioning," Victor replied with academic interest. "For 3 years, you've been playing at being human, pretending that sentiment and love could overcome your essential nature. Tonight, you're going to prove that training always triumphs over emotion." Victor pulled out a tablet, showing Elena live footage from inside Sarah Cross's kitchen. The elderly woman was indeed having tea, completely calm and unaware of the danger surrounding her. But Elena could see Victor's men positioned throughout the house, weapons trained on an innocent woman whose only crime was loving someone without conditions. "Here's how this will work," Victor continued conversationally. "You're going to kill Mrs. Cross yourself, Elena, with your own hands, while I broadcast the footage to your Mr. Stark and his federal friends." Elena's blood turned to ash in her veins. "I'll never." "Oh, but you will," Victor interrupted with absolute certainty. Because if you refuse, my men will kill not just Mrs. Cross, but every person in a 50-mile radius who might have shown you kindness during your time in hiding. The grocery store clerk who smiled at you. The postal worker who delivered your letters. The veterinarian who treated the stray cat you fed behind Mrs. Cross's barn. Elena stared at Victor in horror as she realized the scope of his surveillance and the calculated cruelty of his ultimatum. You're insane. I'm thorough, Victor corrected. Elena, you were my greatest creation because you understood that sentiment is weakness. For 3 years, you've been contaminated by American notions of love and redemption. Tonight, you return to your essential nature, or dozens of innocent people die. Elena felt the walls closing in around her as Victor's trap revealed its true dimensions. He wasn't just trying to reclaim her. He was trying to destroy the person she'd become and resurrect the weapon she'd been. I won't do it, Elena said quietly. Victor's expression grew disappointed, but not surprised. I thought you might need encouragement. Victor activated his tablet, and Elena heard Sarah Cross's voice coming through speakers she hadn't noticed. Mia, sweetheart, is that you? The nice man said you were coming to visit. I've made your favorite cookies. Elena's heart broke as she heard the love and excitement in Sarah's voice. The woman who'd saved her from despair was about to become the instrument of her destruction. You have 30 seconds to decide, Elena, Victor said with clinical detachment. Kill Mrs. Cross quickly and mercifully, or watch my men kill everyone she's ever cared about slowly and painfully. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices crushing down on her. Victor had designed the perfect trap, one that used her humanity against her, that transformed love into the weapon of her own destruction. But as Elena stood in that Virginia meadow, surrounded by threats and ultimatums and the ruins of every hope she'd built for a normal life, she heard Adrian's voice in her earpiece. Not giving orders or tactical updates, but simply saying the words that reminded her who she'd chosen to become. Elena, I believe in you. Whatever choice you make, I believe in your strength, your intelligence, and your love. You're not Victor's weapon anymore. You're your own person, and you're stronger than he could ever imagine. Elena opened her eyes and looked at Victor. This man who'd shaped her from childhood, who'd turned her into an instrument of death, who believed that love was weakness and sentiment was failure. You're right about one thing, Victor, Elena said with growing confidence. Training does triumph over emotion. Victor's smile was triumphant. I knew you would understand. But you made one crucial mistake, Elena interrupted, moving closer to Victor with the predatory grace he'd taught her. You trained me to be your perfect weapon, but you never trained me to be loyal to you. You trained me to win. Elena's hand moved with inhuman speed, drawing the concealed blade Victor had never suspected she'd hidden in her dress. But instead of attacking Victor, she pressed the knife to her own throat, the edge drawing a thin line of blood that made Victor's eyes widen with shock. New terms, Elena said with deadly calm. Release Sarah immediately, withdraw your teams, and disappear forever. Or watch your greatest creation destroy itself, rather than become your weapon again. Victor stared at Elena with an expression of amazement and rage. You're bluffing. Am I? Elena pressed the blade deeper, feeling warm blood trickle down her neck. Victor, you taught me that the only way to beat an opponent who holds all the cards is to change the game entirely. So here's my change. You can't use me to kill Sarah if I'm dead. Victor's composure cracked for the first time since Elena had known him. Elena, if you die, Mrs. Cross dies too. My orders. Your orders assume you have a weapon to demonstrate, Elena interrupted. But if your perfect creation self-destructs rather than submit, what does that say about your methods? What does that prove to the world about the power of your conditioning? Elena could see Victor's mind racing through implications and consequences, realizing that Elena's death would transform his triumph into a public failure that would destroy his reputation and his organization's credibility. Besides, Elena continued with growing confidence, you've forgotten something important about your training, Victor. What? Elena smiled with the peace of someone who'd finally found her purpose. You taught me to always have a backup plan. Elena's earpiece crackled with Agent Reacher's voice. All teams in position. Hostage secured. Awaiting signal. Victor spun around as the meadow erupted with federal agents emerging from concealment, his perfect trap collapsing as Elena's real plan revealed itself. You see, Victor, Elena said, lowering the knife from her throat. While you were designing elaborate psychological warfare, I was remembering something you never taught me. How to trust other people. How to work as part of a team instead of just as a weapon. As federal agents surrounded Victor and his remaining operatives, Elena realized that love hadn't made her weak. Love had made her smart enough to know when to ask for help. Love had made her brave enough to risk everything for people who mattered. And love had made her strong enough to defeat the man who'd created her by becoming something he'd never imagined possible. Not just a perfect weapon, but a perfect human being. Victor was shouting orders to operatives who were already in federal custody, his empire crumbling around him as Elena watched with the satisfaction of someone who'd finally written her own ending. "This isn't over," Victor snarled as agents restrained him. "You can't run from what you are forever." "You're right," Elena agreed. "I can't run from what I am. But Victor, what I am isn't your creation anymore. What I am is a woman who loves people enough to fight for them, smart enough to outthink her enemies, and strong enough to choose her own destiny." As Victor was led away in handcuffs, Elena felt arms encircling her from behind. Adrian, who'd somehow reached her side despite every protocol and security consideration. "Is it over?" Elena asked, leaning back against Adrian's chest and feeling his heart hammering against her shoulder blades. "It's over," Adrian confirmed, his voice thick with relief and love. "Sarah's safe, Victor's in custody, and you." "I'm free," Elena finished, understanding finally settling into her bones. "Victor's dead, his organization is destroyed, and I'm finally free." Elena turned in Adrian's arms, seeing not just love in his eyes but pride. Pride in the woman she'd chosen to become, pride in the courage she'd shown, pride in the victory they'd achieved together. "So what happens now?" Elena asked. Adrian smiled with the confidence of a man who'd spent months falling in love with every facet of a complex woman. "Now we go home, Elena Volkov Stark." Elena's heart stopped. "Stark." Adrian pulled out a small velvet box that somehow looked perfect even in a Virginia meadow surrounded by federal agents and the wreckage of international espionage. "Elena, will you marry me?" Adrian asked simply. "Will you spend the rest of your life being who you choose to be instead of who someone else made you?" Elena stared at this incredible man who'd risked everything to save her, who'd seen through her lies to the truth underneath, who'd loved her enough to help her defeat the demons of her past. "Yes," Elena said, tears streaming down her face as Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger. "Yes to everything. Yes to marriage, yes to freedom, yes to choosing love over fear." As they kissed in that Virginia meadow, surrounded by the evidence of their victory over forces that had tried to destroy them, Elena realized that her story wasn't ending. It was finally beginning. 6 months later, Elena stood in the penthouse office where her new life had begun, but everything was different now. The space that had once felt like a battlefield was now filled with wedding plans, travel brochures for their honeymoon, and the comfortable chaos of two people building a life together. "Mrs. Stark," Adrian said from behind his desk, his voice carrying playful formality that made Elena's heart skip even after 6 months of marriage. "Your 3 o'clock appointment is here." Elena looked up from the security briefings she'd been reviewing. Her new role as Director of International Security for Stark Industries was proving to be exactly the challenge she'd needed to channel her skills toward protection rather than destruction. "Send them in," Elena replied, then paused as Adrian's expression grew oddly serious. "Adrian, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Not a ghost," Adrian said carefully, "but definitely someone from your past." The office door opened, and Elena felt her world tilt as Director Sarah Connor entered, followed by a woman Elena had never expected to see again, Dr. Natasha Romanoff, the psychiatrist who'd helped Elena build the Mia Cross identity during her first months in America. "Elena," Dr. Romanoff said warmly, her Russian accent barely detectable after years in the United States. "You look happy. Marriage suits you." "Natasha," Elena replied, standing to embrace the woman who'd helped her learn to be human. "What are you doing here? I thought you were teaching at Harvard." "I was," Natasha confirmed, "until Director Connor approached me about a rather unique opportunity." Director Connor stepped forward with the professional demeanor that Elena had learned to associate with federal complications. "Mrs. Stark, we have a proposition for you. One that could help dozens of people in situations similar to your own." Elena felt Adrian's protective tension from across the room, but she also sensed opportunity. "What kind of proposition?" "A new program," Director Connor explained. "Federal rehabilitation for former foreign operatives seeking asylum in the United States. We want you and Dr. Romanoff to run it together. You providing practical training for civilian integration, Natasha handling the psychological transition." Elena stared at the two women, processing the scope of what they were offering. You want me to help other people escape the kind of life I escaped from? More than that, Natasha said gently. You'd be helping them discover who they are when they're not defined by their training, their handlers, or their past mistakes. You'd be giving them what Sarah Cross gave you, the chance to choose their own identity. Elena looked at Adrian, seeing not concern but pride in his expression. Over the past 6 months, they'd talked often about how to use Elena's unique experience to help others, about transforming her past into a foundation for preventing future tragedies. There's more, Director Connor continued. We've identified 17 former operatives currently in hiding across the United States. People like you, highly trained, deeply traumatized, desperately trying to build normal lives while running from handlers who view them as property rather than people. 17 people living the life I was living, Elena said quietly. 17 people who could benefit from guidance by someone who successfully made the transition, Natasha confirmed. Elena, you've become proof that redemption is possible, that people can change, that love really can triumph over conditioning. Elena felt tears stinging her eyes as she realized they were offering her the chance to transform her greatest pain into her most meaningful purpose. Adrian, what do you think? Adrian stood and moved to Elena's side, his hand finding hers with the automatic comfort that had defined their marriage. I think you've spent 6 months learning to live for yourself. Maybe it's time to help other people learn the same thing. Elena looked around the office where she'd first seen threatening messages that had nearly destroyed everything, where she'd learned that love could survive any secret, where she'd discovered that trust was possible even after betrayal. There's one condition, Elena said to Director Connor. This program doesn't turn former operatives into federal assets. We help them become civilians, not recruitment opportunities for American intelligence. Director Connor smiled. Mrs. Stark, that's exactly why we want you running the program. You understand the difference between rehabilitation and exploitation. Elena felt a sense of rightness settling into her bones. The knowledge that all her pain, all her training, all her years of running and hiding had led to this moment where she could finally use her experience to help rather than harm. I accept, Elena said firmly. But I have a few requirements about how the program operates. As Elena began outlining her vision for helping former operatives build new lives, Adrian watched with amazement and pride. The woman who'd started as his secretary had become his wife, his partner, and now the architect of a program that could save dozens of lives. There's something else, Director Connor said when Elena finished her presentation. Something you should know about the program's first candidate. Elena felt a familiar chill of anticipation. Who? A 15-year-old girl extracted from a training facility in Belarus last month, Natasha said gently. She's been conditioned since childhood, doesn't speak English, and has never experienced normal human kindness. Elena's heart clenched as she recognized her own story in the description. She's just a child. She's a child who reminds everyone who meets her of another young operative who was saved by an elderly librarian in Virginia, Director Connor said meaningfully. Someone who might understand what she's going through. Elena looked at Adrian, seeing her own thoughts reflected in his expression. They'd talked about starting a family someday, but they'd never imagined their family might begin with helping a traumatized teenager learn to be human. What's her name? Elena asked. She doesn't remember her real name, Natasha replied. The handlers called her Asset 47. But Elena, when she smiles, which is rare, she looks exactly like you did when Sarah Cross first brought you home. Elena felt destiny settling around her like a comfortable coat. Bring her here. To New York, to our home. Let's show her what family looks like when it's chosen instead of assigned. Adrian squeezed Elena's hand, his voice thick with emotion. Are you sure? I'm sure, Elena replied with absolute conviction. Adrian, you saved me by showing me what love looked like. Now we save her by showing her what safety looks like. As Director Connor and Dr. Romanoff finalized the details of the rehabilitation program that would change dozens of lives, Elena realized that her story had transformed into something she'd never expected. Not just a romance or a thriller, but a legacy. Viktor Kozlov had tried to create the perfect weapon by destroying a young girl's humanity. Instead, he'd created the perfect protector by teaching that girl exactly what humanity was worth fighting for. Mrs. Stark, Director Connor said as they prepared to leave. There's one more thing. Viktor Kozlov's trial begins next month. The prosecution wants to know if you're prepared to testify. Elena felt Adrian's protective tension, but she also felt her own resolve crystallizing. I'll testify. Not as a victim, but as someone who's living proof that Victor's methods fail when they encounter something stronger than fear. And what's stronger than fear? Director Connor asked. Elena looked at Adrian. This incredible man who'd loved her enough to fight for her, trust her enough to marry her, and believe in her enough to help her save others. Love, Elena said simply. Love that chooses to protect instead of possess. Love that builds instead of destroys. Love that creates families from strangers and turns weapons into warriors. As Elena prepared to testify against the man who'd created her, to help traumatized operatives build new lives, and to start a family with the man who'd shown her what happiness looked like, she realized that Victor had been wrong about everything that mattered. Training didn't triumph over emotion. Love triumphed over everything. And sometimes the best revenge against someone who tried to make you into a monster was becoming so beautifully human that their worst efforts served your greatest purpose. Elena Volkov-Stark was no longer running from her past. She was using it to build a future worth fighting for. 1 year later, Elena stood in the kitchen of their Connecticut home, teaching 15-year-old Katia how to make Sarah Cross's chocolate chip cookies while Adrian helped their newest placement, a 17-year-old former operative named Alex, fix the tree house they'd been building in the backyard. The Stark Foundation's rehabilitation program had grown beyond Elena's wildest dreams, providing new identities, psychological support, and loving families for 23 former operatives in its first year of operation. But it was moments like this, watching traumatized teenagers learn to laugh, to trust, to hope, that reminded Elena why every difficult day was worth it. Elena, Katia said in carefully practiced English, her Russian accent still strong but her smile genuine. Cookies smell good. Sarah grandmother would be proud, yes? Yes, Elena agreed, her heart full as she watched this brave girl, who'd been conditioned to kill before she could legally drive, discover the simple joy of baking. Sarah would be very proud. Through the kitchen window, Elena could see Adrian patiently showing Alex how to hammer a nail without hitting his thumb, both of them covered in sawdust and grinning like conspirators. Alex had been with them for 3 months, and his transformation from terrified weapon to normal teenager continued to amaze everyone who knew his story. The front doorbell chimed, and Elena heard Sarah Cross's familiar voice calling out, "Mia, darling, I brought fresh vegetables from the garden." Elena smiled as she realized she'd probably never stop being Mia, to the woman who'd first taught her how to be loved unconditionally. Sarah had moved to Connecticut 6 months ago, claiming she wanted to be closer to her granddaughter, but really wanting to help with the children who needed the same kind of patient, unconditional love she'd given Elena years ago. "Grandmama Sarah," Katia called excitedly, running toward the front door with floury hands and chocolate on her cheek. The relationship between Sarah and the teenagers they'd placed had been immediate and profound, Sarah's grandmother instincts apparently extending to any child who needed nurturing. Elena followed Katia to the front door, where Sarah was dispensing hugs and admiring the latest drawings Katia had taped to the refrigerator. At 73, Sarah Cross had become the anchor of an extended family that included former Russian operatives, federal agents, and the billionaire who'd somehow convinced them all that home was wherever love lived. "Elena, dear," Sarah said, pulling her into the hug that still made Elena feel like she was home. "I brought something special today." Sarah handed Elena an envelope addressed to the Stark family, in elegant handwriting Elena didn't recognize. "It's from Prague," Sarah explained. "A young woman named Anya who says she's starting a similar program in Eastern Europe. Apparently, word of what you're doing has spread." Elena opened the letter with hands that trembled slightly, reading about another former operative who'd found freedom and was now helping others do the same. The letter described a network forming across Europe, safe houses, counseling programs, and families willing to help traumatized agents learn to be human again. "It's working," Elena whispered, showing the letter to Adrian as he and Alex came in from the backyard, both of them covered in honest dirt and looking happier than Elena had ever seen them. "What's working?" Adrian asked, reading over Elena's shoulder before his eyes widened with amazement. "The program. What we're doing here. It's inspiring people across the world to do the same thing." Elena felt tears stinging her eyes as she realized the scope of what they'd created. Victor tried to prove that conditioning was stronger than love. Instead, we're proving that love is strong enough to heal any wound. Alex looked up from the cookie dough he'd been sneaking, his English still heavily accented, but his eyes bright with curiosity. "Elena, What happens to us when we're 18? When we age out of program? Elena exchanged a meaningful look with Adrian before kneeling down to Alex's eye level. What do you want to happen? I want to help, Alex said simply. Other kids like us. Other people who need to learn that world is not just weapons and missions and fear. Elena felt her heart swell with pride and love for this brave teenager who'd transformed his trauma into purpose. Then that's what you'll do. Alex, you'll go to college, study whatever interests you, and then you'll help us expand the program to help even more people. Really? Alex's smile was brighter than sunshine. Really, Adrian confirmed, ruffling Alex's hair with the easy affection of someone who'd learned that love expanded to include anyone who needed it. Elena and I have been thinking about establishing an international network of rehabilitation centers. We'll need directors who understand what former operatives are going through. Katia looked up from her cookies with sudden intensity. And me? What happens to Katia? Elena pulled both teenagers into a hug that included Sarah, Adrian, and the kind of family warmth she'd never imagined possible during her years as Victor's weapon. Katia, sweetheart, Elena said gently, you and Alex are our children now. Not placements, not temporary arrangements, our family. Whatever you want to do with your lives, wherever you want to go, we'll be here supporting you. Forever. Katia asked with the vulnerability of someone who'd never had permanent anything. Forever, Elena confirmed. Because that's what families do, they choose to love each other through everything. As the five of them stood in their kitchen, surrounded by the smell of baking cookies and the sound of teenagers planning futures they'd never imagined possible, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 2 years ago, she'd been a frightened fugitive living under a false identity, desperate to hide from a past that defined her as nothing more than a weapon. Now she was a wife, a mother, a program director who'd helped transform dozens of lives, and proof that redemption was possible for anyone brave enough to choose love over fear. Elena, Adrian said softly, pulling her aside as Sarah supervised cookie decorating and the teenagers debated the merits of various college programs. Are you happy? Really, truly happy? Elena looked around their home. Not the sterile perfection of a billionaire's penthouse, but the comfortable chaos of a family that had been built from love rather than blood, choice rather than obligation. I'm more than happy, Elena replied, standing on her toes to kiss the man who'd risked everything to save her and had somehow convinced her to save herself. I'm home. Good, Adrian said with satisfaction. Because I have one more surprise for you. Adrian Stark, if you've bought me another ridiculously expensive gift. Not bought, Adrian interrupted with a grin. Built. Adrian led Elena to the living room window that overlooked their backyard, where Elena could see a new addition to their property, a small cottage that matched their main house perfectly. It's for Sarah, Adrian explained. Her own space, but close enough to help with the kids and the program. She wants to write a book about rehabilitation techniques for traumatized children. Elena stared at the cottage with tears streaming down her face, amazed by Adrian's thoughtfulness and the way he continued to anticipate the needs of their growing family. There's something else, Adrian continued, his voice growing more serious. I've been in talks with the State Department about expanding the program internationally. Elena, we could help thousands of people, former operatives, child soldiers, anyone who's been turned into a weapon and wants to learn how to be human again. Elena turned to face Adrian with wonder and determination burning in her eyes. You're talking about changing the world. I'm talking about giving people what you gave me, Adrian replied simply. Hope. Second chances. The knowledge that it's never too late to choose who you want to be instead of accepting who someone else made you. Elena looked at this incredible man who'd transformed from her boss to her savior to her partner in every sense that mattered. Then looked at the teenagers in their kitchen who were learning to dream about futures that included college and careers and families of their own. Let's do it, Elena said with the confidence of someone who'd learned that love really could conquer anything. Let's change the world, one person at a time. As evening fell over their Connecticut home, Elena helped Sarah tuck Katia and Alex into beds that would always be theirs, in a house where they would always be safe, surrounded by a family that had chosen them as much as they'd chosen it. Elena, Katia whispered as Elena turned off her light. Do you think Victor is angry? In prison when he sees what we've built? Elena considered the question seriously. Viktor Kozlov was serving multiple life sentences in a maximum security federal prison, his international network dismantled, his reputation destroyed. But more than that, his core philosophy had been proven wrong by the very woman he'd tried to own. I think Victor is learning that some defeats are so complete they become transformations, Elena replied gently. He tried to prove that love was weakness, but instead he proved that love is the strongest force in the universe. Good, Katia said with sleepy satisfaction. Love should win. Love always wins, Elena agreed, kissing Katia's forehead. It just sometimes takes longer than we expect. Later that night, Elena and Adrian sat on their porch swing, watching stars emerge over the Connecticut countryside and listening to the peaceful sounds of a home filled with love and laughter and the promise of tomorrow. Any regrets? Adrian asked, his arm around Elena's shoulders as they rocked gently in the evening breeze. Elena thought about the question seriously, about the life she'd left behind, the identity she'd abandoned, the fears she'd conquered and the love she'd chosen. No regrets, Elena said finally. Every lie I told, every secret I kept, every moment of fear and desperation, it all led me here. To you, to our family, to this life where I get to wake up every day and choose love over everything else. Even the part where you fell off a 60-story building? Adrian teased. Especially that part, Elena laughed. Because that's when I learned what trust really means. Not just believing someone will catch you, knowing that even if they can't, they'll never stop trying. They sat in comfortable silence, both of them processing the journey that had brought them from secrets and danger to safety and love, and the kind of family that proved redemption was possible for anyone brave enough to fight for it. Elena, Adrian said quietly, do you think we'll really be able to help thousands of people through the international program? Elena thought about Anya in Prague, about the 17 former operatives currently building new lives across America, about Katia and Alex sleeping peacefully in bedrooms decorated with posters of colleges and career dreams. I think we're already helping thousands of people, Elena replied with quiet confidence. Every person who finds freedom inspires someone else to seek it. Every family that chooses love over fear proves that transformation is possible. Every child who learns to trust shows the world that healing is real. Adrian squeezed Elena tighter, both of them understanding that their love story had become something bigger than romance. It had become proof that no past was too dark for redemption, no conditioning too strong for love, no weapon too perfect to choose its own purpose. As they rocked together under the stars, surrounded by the evidence of lives transformed by love and courage, and the unwavering belief that everyone deserved a second chance, Elena felt complete in a way she'd never thought possible. The scared girl who'd been shaped into a weapon was gone. The desperate fugitive who'd lived under false identities was gone. What remained was Elena Stark, wife, mother, protector, and living proof that sometimes the best revenge against people who try to destroy you is becoming so radiantly happy that their worst efforts become your greatest blessings. She'd fallen in love with a billionaire who'd seen through her lies to the truth underneath. But more importantly, she'd learned to love herself enough to believe in happy endings, second chances, and the revolutionary idea that love really could conquer anything, including the past that had tried to define her as nothing more than someone else's weapon. Now Elena was her own weapon, a weapon wielded by love in service of hope, pointed at every force that tried to convince people they couldn't change, couldn't heal, couldn't choose who they wanted to become. And as she sat on that porch swing with the man who'd helped her defeat her demons and the children who'd helped her heal her heart, Elena knew that her greatest victory wasn't surviving Viktor Kozlov's training or escaping his pursuit or even building a new life from the ashes of the old one. Her greatest victory was learning that love wasn't weakness. Love was the most powerful force in the universe. And Elena Volkov-Stark was living proof that it could transform anything, even weapons, into something beautiful. Beautiful souls, what an incredible journey we've taken together. From deadly secrets and international conspiracies to porch swings and chocolate chip cookies, Elena and Adrian have shown us that love really can heal any wound and overcome any past. Their story proves that we're not defined by what others try to make us, but by what we choose to become when we find people worth fighting for. Asterisk asterisk. If this story filled your heart the way it filled mine, please drop a comment below sharing your thoughts about second chances, chosen families, and the courage it takes to trust someone enough to let them catch you when you fall. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you're missing out on more stories that prove happily ever after is possible for anyone brave enough to believe in the transformative power of love. Asterisk asterisk. Thank you for joining Elena, Adrian, Sarah, Katia, and Alex on this emotional journey from weapons to warriors to family. Remember, no matter what your past looks like, you have the power to choose who you become next. Until our next adventure together, keep believing in love, keep fighting for the people who matter, and never forget that the best revenge against anyone who tries to break you is becoming unbreakably happy.